So we're going to wait a couple of seconds. The internet's going to do internet things. So all the places that Restream is broadcasting to will catch up, and it's done that now. So welcome everyone to episode 6 of the Level Up Your Wealth podcast, season 3. I'm one of your hosts, Marcus Howard, and joined by Mark and Mario. We'll get to Mark in just a second. Mario, if you'll say hello to everyone.
What's going on, everybody? Hope all is well here in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, where it was 70 plus degrees. So yes, springtime is amongst us. So we're definitely happy. We're just happy to be here.
Welcome, Mark. Mark, we're so excited to talk to you about all the things. Your experience in the film industry, you starting Venture Starters. Obviously, we want to announce live the 20 companies to be presenting next week. But first, a quick intro. We're going to jump right into some rock, paper, scissors.
Okay. So you want me to tell you which one I'm picking, or is there?
I'm going to send you the link here.
Okay.
While I'm doing that, if you would just tell our audience a little bit about you, just a quick 1 or 2 sentence intro, and we'll jump right into the game.
I started my first business when I was 8 years old. I've been in businesses ever since. I'll just say that I have a lot of opinions about starting businesses. Let me play this game real quick here. We're doing quick match.
Quick match. Yep. So Mario's going to share his screen. If you'll try not to look at the screen, because I'm going to broadcast it so that everyone else can see it. All right.
Now,
it's first to 10.
First to 10. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Now I'm like maybe like 650 to maybe 700%. So I'm pretty good at this.
Am I supposed to pick again?
Yeah, you just keep picking. Yep.
Oh, just keep picking. Okay.
Keep picking, yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yep. No problem. So it resets and you pick again, then it's first to 10 points.
Oh, cool. Now I see. Oh, how fun. You gamers know how to live.
So that, again, I love this game because it's a classic, right? Everybody knows what rock, paper, scissors is. Everyone knows how to play it.
Now, Mark, you would get a kick out of this because you're an investor in nature. So from from a stock market standpoint, you have trends, right? So people react different ways depending on if the market's going up or down. Well, also with rock, scissors, papers, I actually use this within my practice. So the first time we meet with a client, we go over their risk tolerance questionnaire. We actually play this because depending on if they're winning or losing, as you can see your cards, we're able to really see how they react if they're on a winning streak and how they react if they're on a losing streak. Because on paper, you can say your risk is one thing, but then actually in reality, when something's going through the good times or the bad times, you might react different. No, stop talking, Mario.
Cool. Well, this is a fun way to have an icebreaker for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Did you play this game with your wife?
No, I didn't, and now I forgot to. But I'm glad you're reimagining and reminding me of it.
Match point. Oh!
Mark, congratulations! You won. That's what happened. Is that you won?
Okay, I don't know what that means okay, so I should exit out of this, right?
You can exit out of that and join us right back over here in Restream.
Okay, got it. All right, that was fun. Thank you, guys. I had a mini blast.
I can't move on.
What was your first business at 8?
Yes.
So I created a club called, I don't know why it was called the Gan Poon Club, and it was designed for neighborhood kids during summer break. And I got the parents to pay money for each kid that joined my club, which was based in my garage. And basically I figured, and most of the kids that I had in the club were younger than me. So there were some that were 8, but most were like 5, 6, 7-year-olds. I didn't know it at the time. I was providing babysitting services to the families. I thought I was actually like organizing like sporting events and hunt for treasure events and literally just trying to create fun during a summer break. And that wasn't that big of a business. But then by the time I was 12 years old, I started to realize that there were better ways to make money. And so even though I wasn't a stamp and coin collector at the time, I was invited to a weekend event near my house where there was a stamp and coin convention, and buyers would pay to come, and there'd be 100 booths set up of people who were selling their stuff. And I was intrigued by the economy in a room. So I went to dealers and asked them if they needed any inventory that they didn't have time to go hunting on the convention floor to go and find. And I became sort of like an agent for multiple dealers at the events that needed inventory, and I would go run and hustle and find it, and then see if I could, create a buy and a sell, and then add like 25 cents in for each transaction. And I was sometimes able to make, as a 12-year-old in 1973, 72, like $30 to $40 in cash over a weekend, which was a lot of money then. And so, and I would keep going to all of these. Every time there were any of them in the region, I would try and get a ride there. And people started to get to know me. And it was a lot of fun because it was small scale business, low risk business. And I just enjoyed it. And that's when I really caught the bug of buy, sell, and there's money to be made in between if you're offering something of value that somebody really needs. So, and then once you get the bug, it's, those who are entrepreneurs know it's hard not to keep thinking of things to be entrepreneurial about.
Yeah, they call it the spread, right? The buyer, the seller, and then what I get in between.
So, like somebody would say, if you can find me this stamp, I can afford $3.25, and then I'd go and hunt for it, and I basically, try and get them to sell it to me for $3, and then I would go, and everybody knew that I didn't have the cash, so I was running back and forth between booths, like collecting cash, bringing cash. But it was fun, and it was actually, and then I ended up collecting a few stamps along the way. I wasn't as much interested in collecting coins. I should have been. The coins actually stayed viable. The stamp industry basically fell apart and has never really recovered actually since the 70s, as it turns out. So I own a bunch of stamps even to this day that are probably somewhat worthless as well.
That's interesting. So, what was the aha moment for you to make you want to start your own VC firm?
So I'm not a VC. I'm like, how would so I've invested in startup companies for over 40 years, and I figured out a lot of ways to lose money investing in other people's teams. And I've also made money investing in my own teams and lost money investing in my own teams. But when I started to just invest in other people's teams, I learned a lot of lessons about what not to do. And then I actually have a theory that the best solutions to the world's biggest problems are stuck in the hands of people who don't have a lot of money. It isn't always that case, but some of the most brilliant minds in the planet tend not to be very wealthy or have expendable cash or even know how to build a business per se. I've seen this trend over many years meeting in garage inventors. So part of the challenge is that when I used to invest in these type of folks, I kept losing my money because it was the right technology, wrong team, or it was the right technology with maybe part of a team, bad timing. They couldn't raise enough money fast enough to be able to get to the market in a timely manner. Somebody else beat them to the market with something partially better or good or maybe even better. But timing is a big piece of the equation in startup world. So more recently, now that I'm in my 60s, the way that I'm helping startup companies is by mostly making sure they have the right team. And there aren't any recruiters for startups. There's no money in it. There's like, the recruiting model is you make 25% of the first year salary of who you're recruiting into companies, and there's no salaries in startup world. So, there's nobody that actually does what's needed, yet startup companies need recruiting services more badly than companies that have advanced much further into early stage and more mature companies. And the fact that there's nobody providing recruiting services is one of the main reasons why 9 out of 10 startups go out of business. There's lots of reasons, but in my opinion, team is really critical, because the right team will know to pivot even if you've got a bad idea, bad product, and still find a way to the finish line. And there's lots of examples of that. Most of the major companies, big names that you've heard of, they all had a story of trying something else that wasn't really working, and then they had to pivot to something that did work. An example is, like, not a great example because they actually grew to be fairly sizable and they had a lot of capital behind them. But many of you who know Netflix will remember that originally they were mailing a CD to you in the mail, right? A model that just was not a financial winner for them. And when they moved to streaming, boom, 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 now they're one of the richest companies on the planet Earth. And if you look at a lot of the companies that and you look into their history, they were doing something completely different than what they're known for now, or where their profit centers are now. And so, I basically am focused on team, and instead of I am like a VC in a way. I do have a family office. My company does. We do invest. We've made 8 investments in the last couple of years. But more likely, I find a company who is not investable yet, in my mind. Because all they have is a team of people, which is a pathway to expenses, and there's nobody on the team that has a pathway to revenues. And when I hear from founders, if we build it, they will come, as an investor, I know that isn't true anymore. I used to buy into that and I'd lose my money on the faith and belief in that, but I usually need to see on the team a pathway to revenues, not just a pathway to a burn rate and expenses, okay? Because that's how everybody loses their money really, really quick. So, for me, what I do in that case is I help find the team for them, and the people on the team need to usually know the right people. It isn't that the team doesn't know the right stuff. It's that they're only half of a business model. They've got the team that can develop and build a solution, or a product, or a patent, or a software, but there's nobody on the team who knows the right people, meaning that they personally know investors, to avoid having to pitch total strangers. Kiss of death, pitching total strangers hardly ever works. It does work, but hardly ever works. I hate to say, for those of you, if you're looking to raise money, make sure you build some advisors onto your team who personally know investors. Focus on warm introductions. You can't imagine the higher percentage of getting investors to say yes if it's through a warm introduction versus you're pitching total strangers. So, I basically do a lot of recruiting and building teams for equity, because if I build a team and they don't produce the results, I'm not expecting any equity in those ventures. But if I'm building the team that's going to raise all the money that they need, or get them the sales and revenue that they need, then I feel like I'm actually more valuable nowadays than no matter what check size I will write them. So, I'm mostly interested in making sure that the team is the right team. And if I can build it and it flourishes, I expect that the innovators will circle back to me at some future date and say, Mark, you turned out to be our most valuable person, and we'd like to shower you with some equity in the company. I do handshake deals with almost every company now when I do this. And the reason I do that is because I have a line of companies out the door that want my help. And I'm trying to differentiate between those that will treat me right, respect me, and that I like. And the handshake gives both parties a chance to literally just walk away and have no entanglements at all. And I don't need to be on the cap sheet where I own a stake in a company where I didn't bring any value. The candidates that I recruited for that company did not turn out to produce the results, or there was bad chemistry, or any other reason. It doesn't matter. And then, but in the case of the companies where I'm successful at, like, for instance, recently raising 2 million for a startup where I found a CFO who personally knew the investor. And of course, an investor likes to hand their money to their friend who will say, I'll watch out to make sure that they don't piss it away. And can't imagine how much more easy it is to raise money when a friend is calling a friend than when the founder is like pitching that exact same investor. And, the investor is like, I don't know you. So, in this particular case, the founder then circled back to me after we raised the money and said, I'm going to give you stock that's worth $1 million when we exit, based on my calculation, blah, blah, blah. And because she, as a founder, I always like to help women founders if I can. My wife and I are really dedicated to that as well. But we help people of all backgrounds. But nevertheless, in this case, she was really generous with the equity she offered. And as a result, now I'm helping her again to continue to build the company. And so I own a portfolio like a VC, but my portfolio was built differently than the way VCs build it. So I don't really consider myself a VC. I consider myself more of a family office combined with a very talented group of employees of mine who are fantastic at recruiting for startups, who do most of the heavy lifting for me and make it possible for me to populate startup teams with who they need in order to make magic happen. And the reason I know this works is I was in Hollywood for a long time, and the entire premise of how Hollywood works is it's all based on who you know. Right. It has nothing to do with how good you are. I mean, there is some areas where talent does matter, but in general, it's a clique of people who are comfortable with a certain other clique of folks to come into their clique, and it's all who you all. It's the who you know. Yeah. It's kind of like high school all over again. Are you with the popular crowd? So, I hate to say it, but that's how that industry works. When I left Hollywood, I decided to take the same mentality into all other industries, because in every industry, there's the 1% crowd. There's the people who know everybody, that have done everything, that have the wisdom, that's been there, done that. And for them, everything is easy. For the other 99%, it's a struggle. And so if you can find those 1%ers that will become your board members, you're on an advisory board, your chief financial officer, maybe even your CEO. If you're an inventor, just FYI, 90% of investors that are regular investors, I'm not talking about mom and pop and aunts and uncles and all those folks, but the people who invest regularly in startups, we learned a long time ago, don't hand your money to an inventor. Hand your money to an operator, a CEO, a business guy, or women. But basically, the inventor, typically, there's not a lot of Elon Musks who can create, that have both the business side and the creative side.
That's true.
Those are the 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. So, I'm basically focused a lot on how to build my portfolio through the engagement of team enhancement. And as a result of building teams, I came to learn that there were lots and lots of startup founders over these years that don't have even 25 cents in their pocket, and they're not really in a position to do much. So I created this community called Venture Starters to allow for people to come and connect and meet and network. And the reason for that is if they can find a few people to join their team who will make key introductions and warm introductions, then, they at least can get a little further along, where I might be able to then jump in and help them even more. But many of them just aren't far enough along. So I invite them to Venture Starters community. And we last year had over 10,000 registrants for my free events. They're all free. My wife and I pay for everything, and they're free to pitch and free to attend. And people then come to these events and they network and do pitches, and some of them will find who they need, and most of them won't, because it's still a beauty pageant event, and beauty pageant events are not ideal. But when you only have 25 cents in your pocket, it's better than nothing. Right. So, I'm at least creating, the possibility that some of the better founders will find who they need so that companies can move forward a little further. And then, hopefully I can see some of them and get in on the ground floor as well, and, and help them along. I just discovered a long time ago that if I invest my own money in a startup where I know that the founder has to pitch total strangers after they exhaust my money because they found me by pitching me as a total stranger, I usually lose my money in that situation. Or they circle back with me 6 months to a year later and they say, Mark, we couldn't find enough money on our own. If you don't write us another check, we're going to go out of business. And then I'm in this terrible spot of having to protect my original investment by writing another investment. And I hate that with a passion. I never wanted to be in that position with that company. Whatever I agreed to invest, that's what I wanted to invest. And so when that happens, it reminds me that they have the wrong team. So in order to avoid that situation nowadays, I'm really much more fixated on making sure I fix their team first. I'm no longer wowed by the invention, the innovation, the greatness of the solution where I used to be, and that's where I was losing a lot of my money. Now I'm much more interested in making sure that they are surrounded, these solutions are surrounded by the right team. And I'll let you guys jump in a second, but I just want to say that I grew up in Southern California and I'm a Los Angeles Angels baseball fan. Us and the Mets fans seem to suffer a lot over the decades, but nevertheless, we had arguably two of the best players in all of baseball last season on the Angels. And, it goes to prove, since we ended up in last place again, that just because you are a startup with one or two stars that are part of your company does not mean that you have the team that you can field that will get to the finish line and be successful. And you can see that in lots of examples, not just baseball. But that's why I'm personally interested in finding the stars that then need the supporting team. It's kind of like Hollywood. You get the stars to be in the movie, but you need that supporting everything else in order to make the movie. Otherwise, there's literally no movie. So, it all has to come together. An all-star performance with a terrible editor that just means a terrible product still. So, there's a lot of little parts and pieces that make everything work in the world. And at startup level, it's even larger than life, the mistakes or the positives, because you're in a little cocoon, small little thing, and you're kind of growing, and even doubling in size as a startup is much easier than when you're a big company. And it's all very interesting, just having observed and studied businesses from birth to exits. And I've been lucky enough to be part of exits. I'll let you guys talk. Sorry, I went on a long.
Cool. No, you're fine. But no, so it's to kind of circle back. You think about Netflix, I had a Netflix subscription and I had like the CD. So I had, if you remember it was a show called Weeds. It was based in California, and and we was upset because season 3 happened and we lost the first couple CDs or DVDs, and we couldn't get no more because we lost 2. And then 6 months later, I'm at a friend's house and he has Netflix and he's streaming. And I'm like, I don't, are you downloaded? He's like, no, it's not a download. You're playing. I said, well, how can you play it over the airs when you don't own it? He said, it's called streaming. And I did not get it. And years later, everybody streams.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. But I did have a question though. So, and as you don't know, I angel invest. I've invested in 6 different companies so far. 4, I think, successful, 2. Lost all the money, but a story for another day. So when it comes to a startup, like what you think is the biggest mistake that startups, do to allow them to basically A, not attract investors, and then B, not be successful?
So product fit is a theme that is resonates with me. Not for every single startup. Like I'm invested in a startup that we're going to solve sepsis, which 11 million people a year die of sepsis in hospitals. 1 in 3 people who die in a hospital die of sepsis. We all hear about cancer and other things, which are much more sexy sounding names in life science when it comes to tragedy and death. But sepsis is actually, my opinion, the biggest health problem to solve right now. And I'm invested in a company in the sepsis world where market fit, we know that there's a need,
Mhm.
and so we're going for it. Now there could be other companies that are going for it as well, and I've heard of most of them, and I still think we're in the best position to solve it. But nevertheless, most startups outside of life sciences, where it's life and death kind of stuff, um, most of these companies never call on the customers who they plan on selling their solution to early enough on to get their feedback as to whether their pricing is right, their
Mm.
solution is right, who else is knocking on their door saying that they've got the solution. And so by failing to do that and having this mindset of if we build it, they will come,
Right.
they then end up in a world of trouble. And for software companies, and this may not work in gaming, you guys know I have no background in gaming other than I acquired the rights from Major League Baseball and the NFL to create card games in the 90s, which were sort of an extension of the collectible trading card industry because I was one of the people that launched Skybox. We sold it to Marvel, and then I ended up owning the Donruss and Leaf Trading Card Company. And we were selling Major League Baseball and Hockey League trading cards, and we were a major manufacturer of collectible trading cards in the 90s when it was actually, a hot thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most companies, at the end of the day, aren't really spending enough time focused on whether they have market fit. And in the software industry in particular, I would prefer to see the software companies build an example of what the software will look like, but not spend 200,000 to $1,500,000 developing the software to the very bitter end and having it completed. I would rather it looks like the real thing, doesn't quite function like the real thing, but then show it to the customers or the target audience and have them give an opinion as to, is this something that they want? Is this something they would use? Is this something they would pay for? How much will they pay for? And if you actually can gather that market information, then you actually will know what direction to go in. It may turn out that the market says zig and zag and pivot from what you're doing rather than staying course. And
Yeah.
instead of dumping hundreds of thousands into software or millions into software, at least you were able to, for $20,000, $30,000, only create the face of the software, the illusion that it exists, enough just to do market fits analysis. And then if everybody is like, yeah, this is what we need, and I will give you a purchase order as soon as you have it, finished, then all of a sudden everything starts to make sense. And when you go to investors, now the story is, if you invest in this, we have customers here lining up. And what I'm always interested in is the pathway to the money. So if me and my friends are putting $1,000,000 into something, I want to hear the founder say, put $1,000,000 in and we got 10 million in revenue coming.
Right.
But because that makes sense. But if we're putting $1,000,000 in and we don't really know what the revenue is going to be, and it's like, and the revenue is way in the future, and it's speculative at best, then then I might as well put my money in real estate, or I might as well buy Amazon stock, or things where so all of you founders out there, you're competing against the stock market, which is reaching all-time highs, a real estate market, which is, pretty up there, I don't know if it's in record territory, but it's, continues to grow. You're competing, and now Bitcoin, which I personally, I think is going to eventually prove to be a Ponzi model. And at the end of the day, it's just like the collectible trading card market. Me and Topps and all the other producers of cards, I met them all in Hawaii the year before. Like all the owners of the card companies, we get together once a year. And a year before the collapse of the trading card industry, literally the collapse, I was starting to say, should we be slowing up our printing presses because maybe we're like over printing this stuff? And nobody really wanted to hear my concerns. And I didn't actually have any magic ball, but a year later, we didn't even as owners get together in Hawaii to meet. The industry went from 1.7 billion at wholesale down to 250 million instantly. Wow. Because everybody decided it was no longer an investment, that they weren't seeing the values going up, and and too many people realized there was an oversupply and overstock. We were overprinting. The word collectible lost its meaning because we would print as many cards as people were willing to buy from us, rather than short the market and make it actually a real collectible. I think in some regards, Beanie Babies went through that, bubble. There's this thing called the tulip effect. It's like, I kind of see Bitcoin as eventually having, like right now there's demand, and people, and you could probably make money right now because there's this demand. But when that demand dries up because something shocks the system, or all of a sudden overnight, people are like, no, I'm not going to be doing Bitcoin anymore. As soon as that demand stops, the whole thing sort of collapses on itself. And this keeps happening in a lot of things that are more like fad, where there's really truly there's not enough collectability or rarity or whatever it is that they originally were selling. So I don't know. I shouldn't spend so much time on Bitcoin because I'm no expert in that.
So to the point. So people, especially business owners, entrepreneurs, they always say they learn more in something that they failed in compared to something they were successful in. So when that happened, when you guys went from 1.7 billion to 250 million, which is like a 75% decrease in 1 year, that's bad, right? What do you think your biggest takeaway was from a business standpoint to know not to make that mistake again?
Every one of these things turns out to be its own adventure, and they're not identical. Each one is not identical to the other. With regard to Donruss, without getting into the numbers, we sold the company when the market had already basically collapsed.
Yeah.
So, we probably would have, a lot of people would say, hey, you became a millionaire when you sold your stake in it, so it was a success for you. But if we had sold, a year earlier, it would have been a lot better by multiples, but we didn't know. We missed our window to sell that particular company. So I guess the lesson I basically learned there was, if you're going to be in the collectible market, or something that involves a sort of fads, a fad of sorts, where the intrinsic value isn't what people are paying. I guess that's the way I would describe it. Yeah. Like, we were putting a dash of ink on a little piece of cardstock with a picture of Magic Johnson, let's say, and all of a sudden that little amount, like a penny of intrinsic real value cardstock and ink, we're trying to say is worth $25 or whatever the market was saying at the time for a Magic Johnson card or whatever we were selling. I mean, I sold like 5 billion cards. So, we covered the gamut of ways we could sell cards and what kind of ink we could throw on cardstock. But, those industries, you have to be a little cautious about, that the marketplace may evaporate on you. And once it starts, and you can't necessarily stop it. It wasn't a case where if we ran more ads, that we would have been able to keep that going. This was the investor part. And here I will say this also. I was flying from New York to Los Angeles about 2-3 months before the collapse of the card business. And I was sitting next to a guy who struck up a conversation with me. And when I mentioned that I own Donruss, he was like, Donruss, I've been buying Donruss baseball cards for blah, blah, blah. He goes, I have boxes and boxes of them in my garage. And I said, oh, are you a baseball fan? Oh, no, I don't have any interest in baseball. So I said, well, why are you buying all these boxes? He goes, it's an investment. And then 3 months or 4 months before the Beanie Baby craze died, I was in another airplane sitting next to another guy who was telling me the same story. He was going, I just flew to wherever it was that we had gone, and I bought a whole slew of Beanie Babies. And of course, an old guy like him was not playing with them. He wasn't using them as a toy that they were intended for. It was an investment. And so when you have these people coming into an industry where they're not using the products for what they were originally intended for, but they're investing in them, I would say be cautious and careful that you're about to have a bubble. And that's how these bubbles form, is people who shouldn't be in them are now jumping in, right. The unsophisticated, the risk takers, the Wild West. And that usually, or I shouldn't say usually, in my opinion, it at least is indicators that there's time to be cautious. Most of the industries I have moved into post the collectible trading card industry are not that speculative anymore. Now I'm mostly interested in inventions, innovations, real solutions to big problems. I'm trying to solve climate change. I'm trying to solve health issues. Those are the things that actually get me excited nowadays. And they're completely different business models. The collectible market and Hollywood and producing 100 live events, mostly concerts, rock events, those were fun, youthful things that I did. But that's not where my head is anymore. And I've done and I will say I get bored of industries. And the reason why I like my current business model of helping and being part of dozens of companies is I don't get bored, because there's always a challenge with one of them that I can jump in and try and get involved in helping. Whereas before, when the companies would get to be successful, I got bored relatively quickly.
When it goes to actually picking which company or startup to invest in, are you more concentrated on their multiple? Are you more concentrated on their actual mission? Is it a combination of both? Do you look at kind of the sector? Because I know you talked about tech and then also life sciences, which is kind of the same, but different industries. So what are you typically looking at when you actually invest?
I would say team. Like the first page that I like to on the deck, that the pages that I'm most interested is not usually the first page is a throwaway page with some graphics, and the second page is essentially, here's the problem. Okay, and then if they dare to try and tell me how, with a third slide and fourth slide, how big the problem is, I'm already frustrated, because I only need a little tip of, okay, especially if it's a problem we all know about. So I got sent a breast cancer kind of a thing yesterday, and for the first 3 slides, all they were talking about how big breast cancer and the problem is. I know that. I don't need you to waste 3 slides telling me that this is a big problem. Yes, breast cancer in women is a problem. It might even be in men, although this was a product for women. But I want to see the page that says, here's our solution. Okay. If they can't tell me the solution in 1 slide, and it takes 5 slides to explain their solution, I'm already nervous. If it takes them more than 10 slides to tell me the story, it makes me nervous. If they send me a deck with more than 15 slides, the first thing I say to myself is, who's paying me to read this? Because now all of a sudden it's a job. So, I'm mostly, now in terms of the next page, besides the solution page, which is what I'm interested in, is what is your solution, which essentially is what is their business. And then I want to look at the team. And to me, those are the two most important slides in the deck. Now, the pages that have 5-year pro forma projections, I don't even look at, because to be honest with you, there's no way to credibly create a pro forma without just pulling numbers out of your ass.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why everybody still does that. But what I am interested in is there somebody that has a pathway to revenue, and can that person defend what kind of revenue could come in through their pathways to revenue? And okay, so the other things that I look at after I get past team and solution is, what is the ask? And in the ask, I'm mostly looking to see a couple of things. I'm interested in the number, because that is meaningful. How much are you raising? It gives me multiple indicators. One is this an investment for one person, or is this an investment that's going to require lots of people and syndicating this and putting it all the pieces together? In which case, if it's going to require a lot of people, or a VC, or some really big check writer, that's a huge risk. And then I want to know, do they need all this money now, or is this a runway for the next 2 years? I don't need to cover everybody's salary for 2 years. I don't love runways. I love, avenues to revenues. So, and then I basically start to break down and look to see if they even put in a valuation of the company. Pre-revenue companies that have never sold a penny and are still developing what they're doing can't really have a value that's in the tens of millions of dollars. I'm sorry to tell you that, and then when I look at the team, if there's one person on the team who possesses all the knowledge and is sort of like, the star, I will ask the founders, if I get in a call with them, what happens if that person dies in a car accident tomorrow? What does that do for the company, and what does that do for my investment? And if the answer is we're pretty much dead in the water, then I already can tell you that this isn't an investment I want to be part of.
Right.
So I've already had 2 founders die on me because I've invested so many times. It was inevitable that this would happen, but I've had 2 cases where founders died before the companies got far enough along, and I was already invested in them. And of course, both companies went out of business eventually. They always try and figure out how they're going to survive and what to do next. But it usually isn't it's not something that I wish on anybody. It's a bad position, not just, of course, to the bereaved relatives, but it's a bad position for the investors to be part of that as well. So companies where there's one person and it's all up to them, and I know they leave the house to go places, there's a chance they could die in a car accident, and it isn't insignificant. And I don't want to hear that we're carrying insurance. Is not my, that's not how I like to. I like to see teams where, if one person leaves the team, the company can continue on.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier there's kind of a zone that's your ideal amount of money raised. Do you have a number for that? Is it like $1 million? Is it $500,000?
So, the companies that I'm the most impressed with understand that if they take a smaller amount of money and get to a milestone where they can prove that they got there, that the value of the company then goes up, and then it makes sense to raise more at that point. Mm-hmm. The guys that want to raise all the money that they're going to need now before they've hit any of the milestones, and they're going to value the company as if they've already hit all those milestones. Yeah. That's not a model that I really like, So it depends. Now, I will say that, like a lot of investors that have been in the business a long time, the companies that need to raise 20 million plus tend to be the more interesting companies to me. Now, many companies think they need to raise 20 million plus, and they're that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
But those are the companies that are intellectually interesting to me, because there's a small group of investors that can actually do those kind of investments. And those are the people that I enjoy the most talking to. So this is a personal bias where I do like the challenge of raising the larger money. That said, most companies would be better off not raising money at all and growing through bootstrapping and revenues. And the ones that I'm impressed the most in are the ones that literally bootstrap and get themselves to revenue before they need to go and tap a whole bunch of investors. And it's not easy to do, but they are the founders that I'm the most impressed with, generally speaking. Now, there is no absolute in any one of these cases. I'll also say that, whoever is the CEO of a startup, their number one job is raising money. And if they've already exhausted all their family and friends and there's nobody else to turn to than total strangers, then maybe they shouldn't be the CEO at that moment. Or bring somebody onto the team, on the board, or an advisory member who will perform that function so they can remain the CEO. But if they're going to remain CEO and stubbornly try and and this is the thing that annoys the hell out of me all the time. Like, I'll find somebody who is, again, I'm making up a mythical example, a mechanical engineer, and very, very smart at building. Okay, I'll make another example, a robot. And now this guy, because he's a genius at mechanical engineering, he is certain that he can learn how to become a fundraiser by just taking some courses, and then he's going to read some books. And now he's going to be genius at that too. I personally would like to see everybody stay in their lane and then fill out all the lanes with the right people, rather than, these people who are really smart, or a software person who should be spending his time working on the damn software instead of going to pitch events and striking out time and time again. And personality makes a big difference. And I see this every week at Venture Starters, where some of the founders come and they have so much energy, and as soon as they come and they explode with energy and excitement and enthusiasm, and I can't help being sort of a groupie of startup founders, be excited myself. And then we get this entirely different group, which I would consider 80% of the founders, who are reading their pitch.
Oh no.
And it's monotone. Or they themselves can't publicly speak and they are poor at it. Or they're rambling thoughts. They weren't even organized. They didn't even come to the event with an idea as to what they were going to say. Or worse off, since I only give them 2 minutes, they start down their normal pitch as if they're going to do a 5-minute pitch deck pitch with the pitch deck. I only do typically elevator pitches. Although with Marcus, we're going to do a different format, which you'll hear about in a minute. Yep. But normally I like to see the elevator pitch, because if somebody can't wow me with their own words and describe what they're doing in 2 minutes, then my instinct is that they're probably not an accomplished team, and I don't want to put my money into that. I want to be more wowed by words and presentations than a beautiful pitch deck. Even the worst presenter in the world can hire somebody to make a beautiful pitch deck and memorize a speech and schnooker me, versus I got a chance to really see who they are when they can't hide behind fancy pictures. So I personally prefer to see the elevator pitch first before I ask to see a deck. And that's how I've structured Venture Starters on purpose, because it's the format I personally like the best. But that isn't the way most people think. Most people that are in the startup world like to bring their deck. They like to do a more extensive pitch. And most of the companies that put on events with investors tend to like to do that other format as well. And they charge money for that. I do it all for free, because I want to basically find the needles in the haystack and cherry pick out the folks that are the most impressive out of a group of verbal elevator pitchers, and start there. In Hollywood, you usually had to pitch your idea in 30 to 60 seconds without visuals and tell basically enough of a story outline to get anybody to even listen any further. And it's a great skill to have, and it's a skill a lot of founders need to learn how to do.
So one more question before you guys make the announcement. So from a scaling standpoint, do you think a business should concentrate more on B2B, so business to business, like enterprise wise to scale, or you think it's easier and more, you make more money over time if you do B2C, whereas business to consumer?
Depends on what industry they're in and what solution that they have. And I will say, without knowing a very specific case for me to be able to give an opinion on, it's a lot easier to go and talk to 25 businesses than to convince 2,500 consumers to buy what you could sell 2,500 units to 25 businesses. Yeah. And it costs a lot of money to educate a market when you're trying to reach a consumer market. And it's very hard to break into the consumer marketplace with so much competition of stimuli and things going on without a ad budget or an influencer or something unique that you can sort of have that is going to get you a lot of free publicity. I always used to love companies that would show me how many. Of course, we don't have newspapers anymore, really. You kind of do, but not really. But I used to love it when I would see somebody, they would show me that they got 20 or 30 newspaper articles, or they were featured on multiple, television news channels, and it was all free publicity. I love saying, that type of guerrilla marketing. I really love if you're going to go to the consumer market. But if you're going to the business marketplace, it's different. And in that case, I'll give you an example. A company recently wanted me to get involved with them. They invested $1.5 million on a solution. And I said, who's the customer you built this for? And they said, Google. That's their number one customer that they want to get interested. And so I was like, okay, it looks interesting. So who on your team knows anybody at Google? Silence.
Right.
Not a single person on the team knows anybody inside Google, yet they've already convinced investors to spend $1.5 million building something and Google doesn't even know this company even exists. So, I'm like, so what I suggested is we hire somebody on the board who comes out of Google, who knows everybody on the inside. And then all of a sudden the business will look at least like it makes sense to me. So, I'm big on, so the business to business is interesting to me because it's really easy for me. It's easy to find people who either retired from the companies that we were targeting or are currently working for them, and their bosses will allow them to sit on a board or an advisory board. But they know all the right people because that's Hollywood again. Like, I got a chance to work on Lion King, Jurassic Park, all the Star Trek franchises, the Simpsons, and on and on and on because of who we knew. It was not that my little marketing agency, my little advertising business, my 25 employees, that we were ever going to be better than the big ad agencies that had offices in every major city on the planet and handled Coca-Cola and McDonald's and etc. And, yet little tiny me and my little tiny group in Los Angeles, why we kept winning the business was all about who we knew, and it had nothing to do with whether we were better. So, and I could get the business. So, I'm less interested in how great their product or service or solution is if they have the people that know the right people. On the other hand, if they don't have the people who know the right people, then the emphasis on the solution being so substantially better than everything else grows very high, and that costs usually a lot of money and is fraught with risks. In fact, I don't even care whether there's a competitor in the market, with something that's a better solution if we have the people who know the right people and can get the business. You know, that's more interesting to me is the revenue. I'm always looking at every single deck and every business plan from the perspective of what's the realistic pathway to revenue, and are we guessing on all the revenue? And, you know, now in gaming world, it's very different. I don't know anything about games and I don't want to pretend that I do, but when you're, you know, there's going to end up being probably, I'm guessing, and you could tell me if I'm right, 5 to 7 major publishers in the world. Okay, because that's usually what ends up happening in all industries. It's like 5 to 7, 5 to 8 companies that end up being the majority of the revenue, the biggest portion of the revenue of the industry. So if that's the case, what's the pathway to licensing or selling what you're developing to one of them? Or if you're going to compete with them, you know, how are you going to be able to effectively compete? To me, it can't be just on the game is going to be substantially better than what's out there. It needs to be more than just that. So, you know, in my mind, that means like bring somebody on who might be an influencer who can get people talking about the game. It might be some clever idea of, look, I have somebody on my team that can get me a promotion with Coca-Cola so I can, you know, I did do one gaming deal a long time ago when I was in the licensing business that involved Microsoft and the original launch of the Xbox. And I was arranging for a development company, helping a development company to bundle their game into the original Xbox when they gave away 3 free games with the original purchase. And it turns out that company was not able to fulfill its end of the bargain to get the game to get onto that Xbox. And that's a drama in it by itself. But nevertheless, the lesson, but the reason why that company was investable, in my opinion, was we had a contract with Microsoft. And theoretically, if we had been able to pull all the things off, there was a pathway to revenue. But even more importantly, the game was going to be a giveaway free that everybody would see, and then that might have led to, you know, some more, the second version, third version. I mean, I'm no smart guy in gaming, but I understood the value of the contract with Microsoft.
Right.
So, you know, those are the kinds of things that interest me. If you can find differentiators, things that make you look slightly better than everybody else. You don't have to be a lot better. You just need to be slightly better. That slight difference may be enough for sophisticated investors in any market to realize, wow, they're ahead of, you know, the rest of the crowd and more likely to have a good outcome. So, you know, the one thing I will say about startup world is that there's no absolutes. Nobody that you talk to is going to ever be able to give you the exact right advice. And everybody is filled with opinions, and the entire startup world is subjective, including valuation. So like you may value your company at 10 million and I see you as pre-revenue. And if you want me to put in 150,000 into your company, I wouldn't even consider it unless I'm getting a minimum of 10% equity. So in that case, 1.5 million is the most I'm going to even, in my mind, be able to imagine that you're worth right now. So, you know, and again, all subjective. And because you're dealing with so many things that are subjective and gut instinct and, you know, things that are a lot of intangibles, that's why team is critical and warm introductions are the most important. The best advice I can give anybody in startup world is build a company based on warm introductions. Wherever you find yourself having to pitch a total stranger, think to yourself, can I bring somebody on my team who can make the warm introductions for that so I don't have to do this knocking on strangers' doors? And if it's important enough for the company's existence, then it means find that person and give them some equity and some upside to be part of the journey that you're on. And yeah, you don't like to give away equity and everybody told you hold on to it as tight as you can, and but in some cases who somebody knows who can perform that with one phone call is more important than somebody who's going to work 60 hours a week an entire year for the future of that company. And you still have to reward the person who, even though they can do that with one phone call, they may be more valuable, and you need to respect what actual value they bring in results. It's not how many hours you put in, even though all the other founders sweated for years and years, and you're like, I don't want to give up as much of a percentage as Bob's getting, who's been with us for 2 years, to you, yet this guy here with one phone call solves everything.
Right.
So don't get so damn greedy when it comes to that. It would be my suggestion. And you can also create models with advisors and people who come onto your team where they vest over, let's say, 48 months, but you accelerate their vesting the moment they hit the milestone that you both agreed on, so that there's an incentive for them to get it right quickly. And if they don't, you cut them off, and you've barely given them anything because they only, in the 90-day trial, earn 3/48 of, let's say, 0.5% of equity. There's a lot of models for part-timers where you're just looking for them to make some warm introductions, where you don't necessarily have to give away the boat, and you don't have to give it all to them before they perform. So those would be skills worth learning. Some of those like they don't teach that, how to model those things, because nobody in the world is focused on human resource recruiting for startups. But that would be something very valuable for you founders to learn.
Tons of value there, Mark. Thanks. And I don't know if you, ironically, you mentioned basically distribution being important for the success of a startup. One of the co-founders of Twitch, Justin Kahn, was recently quoted this past week saying, first-time founders obsess over product, second-time or multi-time founders obsess over distribution.
So, totally. Like live by that's such a beautiful, beautiful quote.
Yeah.
And that's where I eventually came to figure it all out. It's like, just show me the avenue to revenues. It's so easy to see a pathway to expenses. I just want to see the revenues.
So moving on to next week, this has been awesome. First and foremost, thank you so much for your time. You've shared tons of insights, and shout out everybody who's been joining us. Blake said he was stoked for this session, and Lavoski Brown from Atlanta. We'll be hearing from Lavoski soon. He's actually one of the 20 startup founders to be pitching next week. And on that note, we're going to announce the other 19 startups. So all 20, I'm going to share my screen. I've got them keyed up here. Drum roll. So we've got 20 startups from around the world. As far as Dubai, we've got some in one in London. We've got one in France. We've got the bulk of them here in the US. And we're excited to bring the gaming industry back to venture starters. So I've got them keyed up all here. For those of you who haven't heard about this event's going to be next Wednesday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. PST, which is 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, and you'll have to do the math for wherever you live. Each startup, as Mark mentioned, will get 2 minutes for an elevator pitch. We're adding a bit of a twist here. After that, they have an additional 60 seconds to share a highlight reel or a trailer that captures their product, their service, the value, because video games are interactive, right? So we're going to add an extra layer of engagement. And then we have 90 seconds of Q&A from 3 industry veterans. So we had Justin Brenbaum, we have, I'm blanking on their names now, Vitor, and I will butcher his last name. He's Portuguese and not very good with Portuguese. And then we have, oh man, I can't believe that. Jen Donahoe, who was also a former guest on our podcast, who will be sharing their insights. And if there's time in the 5 minutes, there will be room for open floor questions from the audience. But again, we've got 20 here. Without further ado, here is the list. So the first, and this is in order, the way we set it up is those who are furthest away from Pacific Standard Time and from California, from Los Angeles, will get to pitch first because they're in the morning time where they live. So the first one here is Gamers Home. It's a marketplace for freelance talent. The second is Northern Lights Entertainment, and their game is Nebulae. So it's a video game where Also allows you to kind of simulate politics and economy. Third is Melanin Gamers. And it's a organization that is committed to promoting diversity and inclusion in the gaming industry. Fourth is Realm Link, and it is a platform that allows you to basically transfer your in-game assets from one platform to the next.
That's neat. That's neat.
Better Play Studios is building a platform that is almost like the Netflix service, right? But it's for healthcare providers to offer health services, video games as a mental health treatment. So video games as the value of it is adding video games to help treat depression, anxiety, things of that nature. Next is our Invo. Invo is a platform that allows you to transfer your in-game currencies from one platform to the next. So essentially what they do is allow game studios to monetize player churn. So if a player leaves from game A to game B, they can take the in-game currency into game B.
Mark, I don't know if they're using Bitcoin for that, though.
We'll find out next week. Next is Breshna, and Breshna is a low-code solution that allows anyone to become a game developer, to create their own games. Next, we have Aframe Studios. They're building Universe. So it is a fantasy game that is celebrating urban culture, Black culture. Next is Froglet Games, and they're building a massively multiplayer online game that can be played from your mobile device. And basically you have different types of character classes, and you all compete online in this kind of cosmic space, almost like a virtual game of tug of war. Next is Detonate. It's an esports organization based out of Atlanta. That one I still needed to have set. So this is from a stealth mode company that you'll hear about next week. Industry veterans, really bringing basically couch co-op back into gaming. And for those of you who grew up in the 90s playing couch co-op, you know how valuable and important that is. Next is an esports organization up in New York called Dynamic Focus. This company is based in Georgia, and they have a VR, basically horror game simulator or horror game experience. It's called No Sleep. So I'm sure we'll all be having nightmares next week after they share what
That's a great visual. Love that visual.
Battle Racing is building the future of motorsports. So what they've done is they've taken real electric vehicles, real motor vehicles, and they've embedded their patented gaming technology into the steering wheel. So you are racing a real vehicle around a real track, but it's augmented with gameplay mechanics.
Nice.
I think we had that on the podcast, didn't we?
Yep, that was Joshua Nelson, a former guest on our podcast. Game Day Universe is essentially a large facility, like a LAN center, like a gaming center, but it's also mixed with workforce development, career development, and community engagement. So think kind of a mix between what's the name? I'm blanking on the space, but YMCA meets Dave & Buster's is the name I was thinking of. So if you mix the two of those together, an immersive, interactive space that also focuses on community engagement and workforce development and community value, that's what Game Day U is, through the lens of video games. Wicked Fox is a new studio created by some of the amazingly talented professionals who were laid off over the last 18 months from the major players in the space, your Riot Games, your Activision, Blizzard, your Microsoft. I played the game last night. I'm not even going to spoil it. You have to see it. That they're bringing something that is just, you have to see it next week. What they're doing is they're taking core concepts from very popular games and kind of meshing them together in something that's unique and exhilarating. Next, you have Five Mics. It's a hip hop trading card game. So imagine like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering, but the lens is through hip hop. And this is one of the CEOs the CEO is Ace Patterson, who is also a former guest on our podcast.
Yes.
Artistry is a platform that uses technology to detect generative AI in content to help ensure copyright protection.
Nice.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool.
Genuine Games is, I guess, did I misspell this? So anyway, Genuine Games is another stealth mode company. You'll learn more about what they're building next week, but they're also doing genre matches. So one of their games last year won the Players' Choice Award at PAX East. PAX East is one of the major gaming conferences in the US. And so they have mixed genres of games, and they have the rewards and success to show how impactful that is. And then last but not least is another studio from veterans in the gaming industry, Entropy. So Entropy, you'll have to see it and learn about it next week. But those are the 20 companies that are presenting. We also have, for those of you who didn't get selected this time, great opportunity to network with the investors and other attendees. We will be doing multiples of these events this year. So if you didn't make it into this next week's event, plenty of opportunity in the future. And that's the end of the 20 companies. We will see you next week. Go to venturestarters.com. It's the first event on the list that you can select to register for. I think, what do we have? Over 700 people already registered, Mark?
I haven't checked recently, but I'm expecting around 700 people to be registered. Now, not everybody will show up, so don't be surprised, because I'm a free event and it's free not to show up, but we do have a lot of interest. And we'll talk to Marcus about whether we should put a replay of the event up on our YouTube channel or not. We tend to get 5,000 to 10,000 people who watch a replay of Venture Starters events, if it makes sense for us to do. I don't know if it does. But I would encourage everybody to go to venturestarters.com and just come and hang out and see what Marcus and another gentleman, Michael, who's part of our community, has put together. And I just want to thank you, Marcus, very much for organizing this, because I personally don't know anybody in the gaming space, and yet it's one of the most important industries and categories, and Venture Starters needs to be part of it. And my guess is there will be at least 30 to 60 investors that will be attending, maybe more. And so, you can meet people in the chat. That's how everybody meets each other. So, just come and turn your chat on, and you can start conversations. And those of you who are pitching, try and keep an eye on the clock.
Definitely. So before we go, we have one treat for you. This is something new today. Just launched. Marvel launched a teaser trailer for the X-Men 97. For those of you who grew up watching cartoons in the 90s, X-Men was one of the best animated TV series in cartoons. Animated series.
I made the X-Men collectible trading cards in the 90s. So yes, and we probably sold $5 to $10 million worth of them. So it was very popular back in the day.
So they're actually rebooting it. They're actually starting from the first episode will be right after the end of the last episode from 97. So I'm going to share that, and then we will pack it up for today. Let's see. Here we go. Where is it? Let's see if we can find it. YouTube. Oh no, can I not? Where? I swear I had it set. Oh, so you'll have to look it up on the internet, because I can't find it, because I have way too many tabs. Wait, I found it. All right, here we go. Full screen.
I have the theme music in my head right now, just thinking about X-Men.
I never watched any of the episodes, so I don't remember it that way. I just know we sold a bunch of the art, Marvel ended up having to buy our company because we were making more money selling Marvel art on small pieces of card stock than they were making selling comics. Wow. It was a funny thing, Yeah, it was very interesting to deal with Marvel in those years. They became a very different company years later.
Yeah.
So you have it queued up, Marcus?
I do. Oh, you can't see it. I'm listening to it all by myself.
Hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you for saving me. I forgot whenever we're in Restream. Wow. 3 seasons in and I'm still making that mistake.
I'm sorry. There you
go. Here we go. All right. Thank you all for your patience. Wow.
Watch the series finale of X-Men next Saturday morning. Check your local listings.
I'm grateful to have the chance to say goodbye. I am proud of you all, my X-Men.
Fate lies in our hands now. Now.
We have to stay vigilant. The professor entrusted us with his dream.
No matter how dark it is, we must believe in each other.
We get this done by working together as a team.
Jeez, bub. Keep buzzing in my ear.
Heads up!
To me, my X-Men. Magneto.
The last will and testament of Charles Xavier. Everything he built now belongs to me.
Oh. Disney Plus said, man, I'm trying to make my stock price go up again, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
It's so weird to see the Disney logo and Marvel together. It's still, interesting. But that does look very exciting.
I'm sorry I zoned out. I've watched that trailer now like 4 times because I see my childhood back, and I didn't even realize that you all couldn't see it. So I'm sorry. I was just
I was involved in the animation industry when they were still using cells and art on cell, and it was a whole different, very difficult, methodical way of making animation. My guess is the computers are doing it all nowadays. I have no idea how they did that one, but. It's a different world in animation.
Yeah, they brought back the original voice actors.
Wow, good. That's nice to hear because they all need work. I mean, I do that. I always like hearing. Anyways, it's really nice to meet everybody, and I hope you all will attend Venture Starters events. And thank you, Marcus, for putting together this amazing amount. The 20 that you showed tonight all look really great, and I'm sure my community is going to be interested in hearing and watching and seeing what happens, and hopefully we will do a lot of events this year.
Excellent. So thank you for that. Again, everybody, venturestarters.com to get registered. It's free to attend. It's virtual, so you can enjoy from the comfort of your home. Mario, before we leave, how can people support you and find where you're working?
Yep. Instagram at Payneful Profits, or LinkedIn Mario Payne, or Tomes Financial.
Excellent. Well, it's been a little bit longer episode than normal, but we thank you all for your time. We're excited to see you next week. And again, it's next Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Y'all have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week, next Thursday, to help you level up your wealth. Peace.